the younger version of me thought they were indestructible. It was just all encompassing. It was everything. If I go back and think about what work I was doing, I can't tell you one solitary thing, but I can continue to tell you a whole list of things that I missed.
I come to Paramount and I say, I just want you to let it.
The model that most agents would adopt, let only is not an option.
So Spencer, thank you so much for agreeing to come and chat with me today. It's great to have this opportunity with you. So we've known each other now for how long?
A little over a decade.
Yeah, a little over a decade, yeah. Okay, great. And in my opinion, and I know you don't like this, but I think you are probably, one of the best leaders that I've been in property academy groups with, and certainly, my go-to guy when it comes to anything lettings, asset management, and all of those other specialities. So I'm really looking forward to.
Very kind.
Well, I'm looking for.
Works in progress.
In particular today, one of the bits which I want to try and dive into when we get a chance is the big changes which are coming up on the Renters' Rights Act. And I know that a lot of agents are, referring back to the conversation we had over lunch, shoving their head in the sand.
Yep.
And aren't potentially. Well, there will be, won't there? There'll be a cohort, however big that is. And one of the things I'd love to try and just get out of today is, how can agents better prepare themselves for that, and how can they take something which is a big change and turn it into a fantastic opportunity? But
get on with it.
Yeah, get on. Great. So where I'd love to start though, is just like how you got to this point, and like how's your sort of career with Paramount, and like how did that start?
Whistle Stop Tour, 28th year at Paramount, which makes me feel incredibly old. I was never supposed to be an estate agent. I'm sure everyone says that. I was very happy labouring for my dad. Mother was displeased, so decided that she was going to write a CV for me. I don't know what that said, other than labourer for dad, but I'm guessing she might have been a bit flowery and padded it out, let's say. Got a couple of interviews. One happened to be an agency in St John's Wood. Walked through the door and was just blown away by the energy. That 2 or 3 day placement, I was there for a few months and just fell in love with it. And then had an interview with Countrywide. I was there for 13 months. The training was excellent, but the pathway I thought was a bit blocked because it was just too huge and very hierarchical and very hard to sort of make a mark as a clueless 22-year-old. But still, I thought the training and the grounding was very good. Geographically, we were spread too thin in terms of the property. So I wanted to go local. A job advert came up and I went and had an interview at Paramount. They asked me what football team I supported. That was question one. They must have been super desperate because he's an Arsenal fan. I'm not. He gave me the job and the rest is history.
Great. And who was he?
That's Mark Gregg, who was one of the founding partners. So they started Paramount in the late 80s as an investment company, and then weaved residential sales in, and of course then the poor relation lettings came in after that, and I joined that business. And I always selected lettings over resi because I like to work at a high twitch, very fast, and emotionally I was aware that if I agreed a sale and then I was reliant on that income, there was a big lag time between agreeing that sale and potentially getting paid.
Sure.
And I knew that lettings was much faster. And from my sort of OCD and control freak nature, that suited me. And that's why I chose lettings. And then there was, back then, 6 of us. There are now 30, late 30s, dotted around. We have various different types of employee, whether they be directly employed, self-employed.
So there's a lot to unpack there. How did you make the journey from being an employee into being an owner?
So that happened by default. My manager, I don't like that word, but my sort of mentor, let's say, at the time, he left unexpectedly, as far as I was concerned. And the decision makers took me in a room and sort of said, hey, do you want to have a crack at this? Obviously had no lettings experience from the decision maker's perspective, but it was a problem they needed to solve, and this Spencer guy, like, maybe he can do it. And obviously I said yes without really thinking about it, and then spent the next 3 years, maybe more, making low-level mistakes because there was no one else to help. There was no one to ask, no one else. Well, we do investments and we do sales, and you've got a desk and a computer and you just get on with it. So yeah, that was really hard. That was a tough way of learning. I didn't go out of my way to try and make mistakes, but I also didn't want to play it safe. And we were sort of super considered with our decision making, and the mistakes, the majority of them were made internally. So before the audience was affected, we could address them in-house. So it was a lot of testing things and like playing with things rather than just accepting this is how it is. And I think that's just carried on throughout our, my career and how we operate at Paramount.
So did they give you a stake in the business immediately?
They didn't.
So how did that then, do you know what I mean? You sort of made that transition from...
So they said, they sort of said, give it a go. We were 4 people.
Yeah.
There was not a lot for them to lose. And, I guess I didn't really sense the size of the opportunity back then. I was earning money, living a good life, having fun. Yeah. I was young once. And I had designs to go traveling with my then girlfriend, my now wife. And so I wanted to leave the business for ideally 6 months. And it wasn't a time for me to sort of ask to have a stake in the business, knowing that I was leaving. And they said, yep, you can go as long as you do this much business in this amount of time. And it was almost absurdly impossible. But because I am pig-headed, I went about it and I did it with 2 months to spare. So I said, it's done, I'm going away, and if I come back, would you still consider me? And they were like, yeah, you can come and see us. Anyway, I came back after a life-changing time traveling with my partner.
Where did you go?
We did the Southeast Asia, a lot of time in India. We did Nepal, Cambodia, Thailand, and it was an experience that sort of changed me as a person because I'd never experienced anything like that. We were a family that used to go to Spain or Portugal for a week or two, like most people back then. So for me, that was like, oh, culture. Like, oh, what's this? And then what can I learn about culture and then bring that back into the business? So when I came back, I said, I'm here. I was probably 10 kilos lighter, wearing pretty old clothes with no hair. And they said, you've got to grow your hair back out. And they said, yeah, they welcomed me with open arms. And then I guess it took another few years of sort of proving myself to them from a numbers perspective, because back then it was definitely ring the bell for investments. They're doing great. Residential sales was doing great. For context, when I started, resi sales was turning over around about 100,000 a month. Yeah. And lettings was doing sub 10. Yeah. And everyone was like, why have you made this call? Like, what are you doing here? And I just thought, this is an area where the most growth is likely to happen. Obviously, lettings is considered a bit messy and convoluted, and it's potentially, well, it is way harder than it was. But I thought it was something that could be mine. So we continued to grow and slowly but surely prove ourselves right. And then I was offered the opportunity in 2012, and I grabbed it.
Big moment. Did you not feel like it?
I don't think I'm very good at big moments. I had a tendency, just to move immediately on to the next thing.
Sure, yeah.
And never look around and enjoy the view. Yeah. And that, if I could go back and talk to myself, that would be one piece of advice that I would change, is actually when you've achieved something that you've been trying to achieve for such a long time, you have to really enjoy that for quite a while. And I've always like, okay, so what's the next challenge? I've done that. Yeah. And therefore feeling content back then was a massive struggle for me, because it was always the next thing, the next void, the omission in my knowledge, the gaps, the blind spots, and it ended up being super exhausting.
I can imagine.
Emotionally, and that's something that reflection, the younger version of me thought they were indestructible. And the byproduct of that is actually I suffered some pretty heavy stress-related illnesses ended up in A&E after having quite a big episode. I don't remember much about it. And then having issues with vision in my eyes, where I've got fluid, I had fluid behind my retina, which is a side effect of stress. And then another period, this was all in a sort of 2-year period where I was in a room. I can't remember how long, it just felt like forever. It probably wasn't more than 2 weeks, where any light, any natural light would just be an acute pain, like a pickaxe pain in my head. So I went to see various specialists, and they basically said it's your lifestyle and the way you're approaching your work, because it was just all encompassing. It was everything.
And what period of time was this?
So we were 2 young children in, about to be the third. So it was the realization, like, actually everything that you're trying to do for these guys is, I'm leaving in the morning, everyone's asleep. I'm coming back in the evening, everyone's asleep. So there was a massive connection, I thought, between what I was doing for them and for me, of course, as a byproduct from a pride perspective. But obviously a huge disconnect, because I had no idea who these people were, and missed first walk, talk, bike ride, nativity, everything, because I was doing work that was more important. Now, what I've realized is, if I go back and think about what work I was doing during that nativity or the first bike ride or the first word or whatever, I can't tell you one solitary thing that was really important, but I can continue to tell you a whole list of things that I missed. And we promote that now at work, that is something that I don't want our team or anyone else to have to relive, because it's a regret and I can't change that.
And what was the moment where the change started? Was it a sudden thing, or was it gradual?
Off the back of the illnesses.
And was it one after another? Was it quite sequential?
Yeah, and I was eating healthy and being healthy and training and all the rest of it, but I had no control over it whatsoever. So I was acutely aware that there were things outside of my control that were limiting my ability to just keep on going in the fast lane and be blinkered. And obviously what happens when you're blinkered and you're in the fast lane, you don't appreciate anything you're doing, you don't appreciate anything you've got, you don't appreciate how far you've come, and you miss all sorts of things that are, literally under your nose, because, I've just got to charge in this direction. What I've learnt is I need to take much more of a sort of planned view of things, be more considered, and actually I don't feel guilty about being in the slow lane or even the hard shoulder these days. So we're suffering with that guilt, like, well, you should really be doing more. You've got more time. So I was, working longer hours, sleeping less. The first thing that goes is yourself, all of the classic sort of, but until it actually happened to me, which it did, just thought I would dodge the bullet.
And you're a very reflective person, and I think very self-aware. So a couple of things. Are there any sort of books or bits of advice that you got which helped you think about that in a new way?
It took a long time to get to this point, but I realised that I needed to understand myself better and why I was so hard on myself and why I am constantly so hard on myself. Like, it's not enough, you've got to do more. So I built up the courage, because obviously I thought, this isn't going to work for me, to sign up and have a counsellor who I saw at least once a week for a very significant period of time. And my very quick synopsis of that is, week 1, this is quite good. Week 2 and 3, I'm completely cured now. That's like, we're all done. And then week 4 was the sort of dark realization, oh my God, like, there's so much to unpick here. I live with a counsellor, trained counsellor. My wife is, and that gave me a bit more confidence that it was okay. Yeah. She works with children, but to walk through the door and sort of speak to someone that you don't know about stuff that you don't know about, or you don't think you know about, and be super open and vulnerable, that took a lot of courage for me. And that sort of got me to understand why certain parts in my sort of childhood and the opportunities that I had at work, I took them too seriously. It was all a bit too much, everything was, and I was just way over capacity. Yeah. And what happens is I have this sort of, one of the things that we learnt is to reduce capacity. So as soon as a project is finished, I have a tendency to fill that gap up. Let's say I'm at 80%.
You speak for yourself here, Spencer.
Yeah, I'm only speaking for myself, of course. I'm not asking you to get involved in this directly, Ian, but we've had discussions about this type of stuff. But I have a tendency to fill that up immediately, again, to 100%. The counsellor is just like, it's actually okay to just not have to do that anymore. And he helped me understand that actually the most successful people, he believed in this regard, were the people who had the ability to not go to 100% capacity. And actually, it's okay to have spare free time, scheduled, unscheduled time. So I have diary entries now that might say every week, thinking time, and then straight after that is execution time. Because I think I can think for ages, that's great, we've got this idea, but unless I have execution time, there's just going to be a load of ideas in my book or in my head and all the rest of it. So, I have a way more sort of structured approach to my working week. And also in terms of looking at diaries and sort of diary management and time management is I have what I call green, and that's the time for me every single day. And it might be super early, it might be super late, but it's like, it is time where in the past I would have thought that was me being self-absorbed or a bit wallowy in myself. Sure. And actually now it's totally cool, it's acceptable and required.
And what does green time look like?
Green time is hanging out with people that inspire you, speaking to my family, which basically I stopped doing for a long, long time. Not for any other reason, that it was just, I was too busy. As embarrassing as that sounds. I'm spending way more time with my kids because I missed 10 years times 3. 30 years is a long time. And just to be committed to being the best dad that I can possibly be. And the thing that we wanted to provide is freedom. Freedom to make decisions, to be themselves, to not do the things that obviously you become your environment. But they are acutely aware that I don't want them to do what I did. Yeah. And my dad was brought up in a very Victorian sort of environment, and he worked 7 days a week. So guess what?
That's your role model.
But he didn't have that opportunity, seeing a counsellor, like just no way. Yeah. Like, Dad, how are you? Yeah, I'm fine. No, Dad, how are you really? Remember your place. That's the sort of, whereas thankfully the world has changed, and, showing vulnerability in the right places to the right people, I see as a huge positive.
Yeah, that's really, really, really interesting. Thank you for sharing that. I really appreciate it. If you were going to try and describe your superpower, what would you say it is?
I'm not very good at this. I would say superpower I would struggle with.
Okay.
I would say that I ruthlessly persistent. I was that in all things in my life, which actually was challenging and led to overcapacity immediately. Yeah. And now I do that, the same approach, but with the things that actually are meaningful to me at that time or required from a work perspective. If someone said that can't be done, my ears will prick up. Absolutely. No, I think we might be able to do it, we're just not thinking about it the right way. That's the exciting part of life. If someone says, that will never work. Hold on a minute. Let's just see if we can talk it through and see if we can make it better than it is. So I think effecting positive change.
Yeah, absolutely. Especially when others doubt it. Is that right?
Yeah, and by doing that and encouraging other people to think like that, automatically you're in a better workplace.
100%. I think you've answered this in your slightly self-deprecating way, as you were giving me your superpower reluctantly.
Very reluctant.
Very reluctant. Okay, but so the negative side of your superpower is the way that you used to use your superpower on the things which didn't actually matter as much as the things which are really important in your life. Is that a fair representation?
Yeah, I didn't have any filter over what was important and what could have waited or actually wasn't significant. Everything got all of the time, or so I thought. So, must-haves now, nice-to-haves, and then sprinkles. So, that's how I think of, my output. So there are, whereas before it'd be those three things would all be in the pot together. So potentially I might miss a must-have. Well, I do my must-haves first from a time perspective. And then hopefully most days you get to a point where you end up with a few sprinkles. But you can't start with sprinkles.
But you want to get there?
Yeah, of course. But, there was no filter around what those things were. So I didn't really, everything was a task, but not ordered. So I've just got to get through it as quickly as possible.
And however long it takes.
Yeah, I'm just going to sit here until it's done.
That's it. And that myopic focus, that ability to work through problems that other people would give up on, obviously is that superpower, isn't it? Yeah. But yet, as with every superpower, it's got its downside. There's a kryptonite which go with it. And it won't surprise you to know that some of my other guests had no problems in identifying their superpower very quickly. So
good for them.
Good for them.
Hats off.
Well, listen, it feels like a good time to take a quick break, and then we're going to come back and we're going to get stuck into the meat and potatoes of the Renters' Rights Act and what agents need to be doing.
Okay, great.
Most estate agency CRMs dictate how you work. Greenhouse OS lets you dictate the CRM. Build a tailored interface that fits your agency. Experience the CRM without limits at greenhouseos.com.
So at the beginning of the podcast, I mentioned that I considered you to be, one of the experts that I turn to in moments of great crisis when it comes to lettings.
I, in turn, go to my experts to ask them the questions and then relay immediately back to you, Ian.
So Renters' Rights Act, okay, in really simple terms that even an estate agent can understand, what are the opportunities which are presented by the Renters' Rights Act?
Connection, in simple terms. The model that most agents would adopt, which would have been traditionally let-only, rent collection managed. Let-only is just not an option and hasn't been, in our humble opinion, for a long, long time.
Why is that?
Because I feel strongly that it's super hard to maintain a connection with the owner, the property, and the resident after the move-in. Like, why are they still around? Whereas you're collecting the rent, you're producing statements, you're offering advice, you're communicating with a resident. That resident at some stage is going to tell other residents they've had a great experience with these guys, hopefully. They are going to move out of that property. They will move into a bigger property. They might buy a property. And we talk about creating this sort of spider's web of positivity. And when you have a transaction, if that's the right word, and it's like, we're done, that to me is just a missed opportunity. And this was way before, any of the changes that are, 1st of May, et cetera. This was just about how can we serve the audience better, because people are going to be unsure or uncertain of things at different times. So if they know that we're there and, things like newsletters but not bombarding people, like giving them stuff that is specific to them is really important. But the connection, the sort of symbiotic relationship between an agent and its audience is huge. And if you give them an opportunity not to be connected with you, that to me is very puzzling. Why a decision would be made like that.
So if I'm an owner and I come to Paramount and I say, I just want you to let it, what would I be told?
Our entry level service is rent collection.
So it does not exist?
Yeah, it's like going into, a baker's and asking for a string of sausages.
Okay, I was going to go sausages, actually. That's interesting.
It's not, we don't have it.
Yeah.
It's not available.
Okay, great. So that's the first thing. So if you're an agent approaching this, you want to emphasise connection, or it's an opportunity for more connection, and therefore would you take
Which then leads to value.
Yeah, absolutely.
Adding value.
Okay, great. And so would you remove the letter-only service altogether?
100%.
Great. Okay.
Swear words.
Okay. So you're saying is that specific to the Renters' Rights Act, though, in the sense that you're saying that previously you would have done that? So what's the...
Well, we previously did it because of things we've just discussed, but now if I was in a position where I did have let only as a service, I would immediately stop that. Rent collection would be entry level, and you're moving towards things like rent recovery policies. They were maybe a sprinkle. To me now they're a must-have.
And just again for the uneducated, uninitiated, why now does a rent insurance policy for an owner, why is that now, in your opinion, mandatory?
Well, a few reasons. Number one, we have no idea the pressures that the courts are going to be under from a time perspective. They're going to get worse. And currently they're not particularly rosy. Number one. Number two, you want to protect every single owner that you're interacting with. And sometimes, some tough love is really important, and you might not get any income whatsoever for 12, 18-month period. Or there is this alternative solution, which is tax deductible, which really as a seesaw is so heavily weighted in terms of the investment of a few £100s to cover, depending on who you're with, tens of thousands of pounds. And then, from a business owner's perspective or decision maker's perspective, you're protecting the business from a fee income. Absolutely. Yeah. Because if the rent stops, guess what? You're not going to get paid. Yeah. So I think decision making should always take a sort of planned view. If we make this decision, who are we trying to benefit? Yeah. And actually, if we're dragging everyone in the same direction, so that's owner, the business, the resident, everyone with us, then it makes complete sense. And again, it's the sort of storytelling and being prepared to tell owners from the get-go of a few trip hazards. Yeah. Some of these are actually waves now.
So rent insurance policies, absolutely mandatory. Binning let only would be another kind of clear, tangible takeaway. Yeah. Are there any other areas where you'd say, like, this is a big opportunity?
Well, your RC rent collection moving over to managed. Yeah. If you are going to protect the owner properly, you need to tell them what their responsibilities are as of the 1st of May. And they are onerous to busy people. And like everything, the devil's in the detail and the small print. One small error here, there, can mean that you're in a situation where you have a resident that's in situ. And of course, you've got to work to the worst case scenario. If you choose the right resident to move in, there's hardly a time when this will be required. But, being risk averse as a property owner, from an owner's perspective is super important. So let the agent take the heavy lifting, and there's obviously a fee that you're going to get from that as an agent, but the fee that you get over the responsibility is huge. So it also is a little bit muddy for me now, and I think this is the bit that we need to sort of work on a little bit more, is actually the grey area between your rent collection service and your managed service. That needs to be so clear, because if something goes wrong, guess where the owners are going to be pointing? It's down to the agent.
Okay.
But if your rent collection service is not explicit in terms of what your responsibilities are as an agent, and something goes wrong, or you just help that person out, but that gas safety that you arranged for me? Well, no, you need to be like, this is all the stuff that you need to be responsible for as a rent collection owner. So, fear is, a strong word, but actually, you've got to be super cautious as an owner. Like any property investment for me now, moving forward, it always has been like this, but moving forward more so than ever before, requires a fully managed service.
How do you explain the rise of open rent with now 17% of the national market?
So open rent, I think there's a few, I'm not convinced by that data. I know I'm saying your data is correct, but I know that there are certain agents that put properties onto open rent.
I see, okay. Do you think that's a big factor?
I think this is definitely a factor because obviously portal costs are high.
Sure.
So I'm going to get my property, my portfolio out onto a platform where I'm going to get a resident attracted to said unit. If it's going to cost me a fraction of the price, I'm going to go with that. There is an element of the Wild Wild West, and I think it's an area where owners who are not operating as they should, that's where they hang out.
And do you think it's because of the rising costs of being a landlord that therefore, if in the absence of value, so if the agent hasn't created value or doesn't deliver value by delivering a poor service, they're like, well, my margin's been squeezed as interest rates have gone up on my mortgage on my property, and therefore, there are all these other costs which are being added. So I'm going to try and cut the agent out and go for a let-only service.
I'm not convinced by that. It plays a part, but I think there's just a lack of understanding of what the responsibilities are.
So why is it growing though then? Is it, if it's not landlords exiting the managed market, is it agents let-only service, which they're either not offering, like Paramount, or potentially, looking for a lower cost version of it?
I think we should be looking at their data in 6 months post the 1st of May and see what that looks like then. It is a trend where owners will be looking potentially to cut costs. That is part of it, but when we have had situations where we've gone to look at properties where the owner had engaged with open rent in the past as a platform to let, the properties are not compliant. And the owner is saying, but here are my certificates. Like, yeah, that's all great. That's an element covered. There's your gas safety and there's your EICR, etc., etc. That's wonderful, but what about a lack of IP rated lights in the bathroom, or a thumb turn lock, or how is that individual going to escape if there's a fire, etc., etc. There's lots of different things that you need to be. I think good agents, if you go back to the word property manager, they need to be property professionals, and what I mean by that is they need to know about properties. Yeah. What is required, what makes a property interesting for a consumer to say, yeah, I want to go and live there. That's great. And I think lots of people do that quite well. Yeah. But then it's about the rules and regulations and compliance required, and the health and safety, and that just going that extra mile to make sure that each and every resident is super safe during their tenure at that property.
How much do you think the average property manager, or asset manager as I think you still call them, how much do you think they earn?
Not enough.
Ballpark 35, 40? Is it that sort of number? Is it less?
So I'm going to be maybe a bit controversial here. I think most agents, whether it's a surveyor or something of that ilk, certainly qualified, I see it inverting completely. And property managers move into asset managers, wealth management, or in part. I see those types of roles earning double what a consultant will be earning, particularly in the world of rentals. Yeah. Because, and I can only talk about our data set. Sure. Property comes on, 100 people want to see it. You have a filtration system, which, you try and show your best 5. Guess what? One of them take it, and you go again, and you go again, and you go again.
And are you saying that's not a 90 grand a year job?
I think there is a bias towards a sort of an old school tradition of how people who do that job are perceived within their own agencies. And actually, if you had people who were totally focused on the product, the property, and you do your prep brilliantly well pre-marketing, the audience rocks up, and guess what? One of them, maybe 2 of them, or 3 of them will want to live there. Yeah. So actually, the artistry for me comes before it goes to market. Yeah. And then it goes to market, property's on the market for 2, 3, 4 days. Yeah. Then you've got a property manager or asset manager, whatever, of that ilk. They're the people that need to look after that property for 1,000 days. Absolutely. Before it recycles to the people who are earning double the amount of money that these people that have every single touch point. And I think from an agency perspective, They need to have a huge understanding that the property manager and the asset manager who are on the front foot, not, oh, we haven't heard from Ian for 3 months, he must be fine. No, we need to be speaking to Ian and make sure that he is okay, whether you're a resident or an owner. And that way, that's where the growth sits within the business. Because actually letting a flat, because of technology and videography and all the rest of it, and it's only going to get better. Sure. Decision making is going to be easier for the consumer. It's going to be more realistic, what you see online to what it actually is when you rock up. I just think those touch points during the course of the tenancy and pre-launch, there will be a bias where an agency worth their salt will have to pay those people significantly more money. And that's my opinion.
And I think there's a lot of logic in that. And there's been a big supply and demand shift, hasn't there? In terms of the amount of stock available, high quality homes for people to live in the private rental market compared to the demand which there now is for those same homes. You've now got a position, as I understand it, and I could be wrong, that as of the 1st of May, you're not going to be allowed to go over the advertised price.
On that point, one of the fears there is we're going to end up with an overinflated market, because the owners are going to know, well, if we can't have a situation where, if there are 3 or 4 interested parties, we can't overbid. So is the starting point of that marketing is going to go up, and then you're going to end up with potentially a lag time of how long that property is on the market for. It will be longer. And therefore, if this whole change is about looking after residents and making sure that they can live in great quality homes, which we're all for, I think it just slows down that an element of that decision making, because if something is overpriced, it's going to take a longer time to let it. But I think, again, is the education required for the resident? In part, for sure it is. But if there's a bias, you've got to lean into your owners and say, hey, look, this is the marketing price. Then you've got to weave in the control that the portals have in terms of their tranches. So, 1,500, 1,700, 2,000 a month. So if you go 2,050 in London, you might be worth 2,050, but no one's going to look at it because they're going to take flats at 2 and below. So I think there's a lot of moving parts, and I think open dialogue with owners, sensible discussions, and reminding people always that actually, for most people, buy-to-let is a pension replacement or enhancer, and it's a long play. Absolutely. So if you're thinking of everything short term, oh my God, but price is going up. Okay, so how long have you owned the property for? 15 years. What was the purchase price? Oh, so what's your gearing? What's it worth now? Oh yeah, actually, I've done way better. Rather than getting them to sort of dive right into that moment, take a plan view. You're doing way better than you thought 2 minutes before we mentioned that, aren't you? Yeah, I've done that. And at the end of the conversation, oh yeah, it's all great, yeah. So I can leave it all with you guys, So I think to remind people, like ask a question like, so, why have you got this buy-to-let in the first place? Ask them that question, and then what are your plans for this buy-to-let in the future? And, a question might be, if you're going to buy another one, would you have any interest in retiring 5 years sooner than you could without one? Most people are going to be interested in that as a question, whether it works or not for them. Sure. But just like, rather than everything's doom and gloom, I just think in adversity, there's always opportunity as long as it's framed in the correct way. Yeah. So there's lots of moving parts, lots of personalities. Oh, it will be a nightmare. It's going to be straightforward. I think if we look at our owner base, I think we've been communicating with them openly about this coming up for 12 months in particular, because obviously everyone's saying, well, what's happening? Well, we can't tell you because we don't know yet. And then, so there's uncertainty, which equals panic. So we've just said to all of them, and now, as it's sort of panned out and got closer, most of them are sort of pretty stable. So we've had 10% who really panicked, really very, very worried. And then a next batch of sort of like, oh no, I feel better now. And 50% who are largely fully managed, couldn't care less, because they're long-term plays. Because if you have a rental business, you should know how long every single one of your owners is planning to retain. Because if you've got 100 properties in your portfolio and all of them are planning to sell in the next 12 months, guess what, Ian? You've got a big problem. But how many agents actually know that?
And that's because they're not communicating, and that
Correct.
comes right back to the very first point that you made. That's fascinating, and I think it's a really interesting idea that the technical job, certainly if it's not now, but as we go forward, will become even more technical. Is that going to be the property manager? And therefore, do our remuneration structures reflect that?
And the job title.
And the job title, indeed. And you are an advocate of asset manager as opposed to property manager.
Yes, I do think we've got that wrong in the past, where we've pinned asset manager on people too soon.
Okay, so you think that is I don't want to say senior property manager, but in other words, it's someone who does more than the label of a property manager would indicate. Is that correct?
They need to have some understanding of capital value. Sure. They need to understand a little bit about gearing, releasing equity, what sort of yields make sense, gross and net. Obviously, if you're looking for capital appreciation, there are certain places in London where that may still happen. There might be areas where your yield is going to be super low, but you've got super stable investment because you're in a very nice part of town. But we've got a lot of owners now, London-based, who have seeked out other areas around the country, university towns, gap areas, places like Reading, where there's lots of HMOs, where your yield all of a sudden swings over 10%, which is very high for London. So but you've got an opportunity to sort of support that owner in their next purchase, even if you're not directly involved in it, because what you want to do is make sure they retain the one they've got with you or the 10 they've got with you. So if they're buying in Reading or York or wherever it might be, that means they have confidence in what they're doing, and the likelihood for them to retain what they have with you goes up. But if you paint this sort of gloomy picture of, the world endeth on the 1st of May, it probably will.
Absolutely. Okay, well listen, let me ask a couple of other questions then before we wrap up. So the first one is, if you imagine, if I generated £8 in a estate agency, if you're a sales specialist like myself, you'd only need to generate £1 in lettings agency, assuming it was broadly, mostly recurring revenue, in order to have the same exit value. So a £1 million lettings business is probably worth the same as an £8 million residential sales business. So therefore, if I've got an eye on exit, whether that's now, whether that's 6 months, whether that's 6 years or 10 years.
I would say 6 months is nowhere near enough.
Okay, that's a fair point. But what are some things I could do to boost that recurring revenue value of my lettings business?
Well, I mean, the simple one is you put your fees up. Let's just put our fees up.
Yeah.
There's a big issue with that. The consumer needs to see value in why I'm going to pay. If you're on 5% management, you're moving to 6%. Why should I pay 20% more for this? So when we tackled this about 18 months ago, you've got to demonstrate value before, this is the decision we made, you put the fees up. So we actually said, we need to put the fees up, and we're going to, but we're not going to put them up for 6 months. But you're going to see differences around here. And we gave a list of the type of things. Communication was definitely one of them. Obviously, investment in the product, voids, all the things that sort of owners are worried about. But then we also gave them an opportunity via Typeform for them to come back to us specifically about areas that we could improve on and or areas that they wanted more info on.
Great. And what sort of things came back?
We don't like your statements. So we adjusted the statements, and then we sent a message out to everyone and we said, we've listened to you, we've adjusted them. Taking problems on head on, I think is super important. I think the touch points in communication came back. Yeah. So some people would say, you communicate with us too much. Others are saying too little. Everyone's different. So it's about how you record that information. So every single person within the business knows that Ian likes WhatsApp, for example, and do not contact him at the weekend. Yeah. It's going to be a big problem. Yeah? Or, someone else only wants email or whatever it is. Sure. So, rather than saying this is our framework, come and work in here, it has to be flexible within a framework. And we're saying within reason, These are our non-negotiables, but other than our non-negotiables, we're going to work around you. And I think once you start doing that, you demonstrate value, you save people time, you're protecting their asset, and people will pay more for convenience. So actually, when we said we're going to put the fees up, there's going to be a big lag time. And actually, if you don't see a difference, we're going to stick to where we are. So the team were acutely aware we have to up the ante. It's all very well saying we're going to do it, but we said we're going to do it, we're going to show you, and after we've shown you, then you can, and of course you have a few people that love to negotiate, but the vast majority of people, we actually had a few, I'm surprised you didn't put the fees up earlier. Now, you can take that one or two ways, but the way we took it is actually, we're on the right track here.
Totally, yeah.
Highly connected. And, I guess the caveat is to this, I don't want to sit here and anyone to think that we feel like we're the finished article, because we're definitely not. We make mistakes on a regular basis. We listen to the audience, we listen to our team, we measure and adjust. One tip is measure and adjust. There has to be enough of a gap in time between you measure and adjust, because what I was doing is measuring, changing, and guess what? Actually, is this better or not? So yeah, I just get the sense that you should be able, in 2026, to deal with an individual on an individual basis.
And you need to have the customised technology, systems, processes, whatever it is, to facilitate that.
And also people in your team who've got a high level of care and know that matters.
Absolutely.
Because if you've got a conveyor belt in your property management department, like for example, how exciting is it to fix a broken tap for the rest of your career? Guess what? I can tell you now it isn't. So, if you give someone that role, they're probably going to stick around for 12, 18, 20, 2 years, 3 years, whatever it might be tops. Actually, if you facilitate methods where they don't need to deal with that, and they are product facing, if that's their specialist, or they're people facing, or they are tasked with every month getting a new contractor on board, or losing the worst contractor. How do you know your contractors are great? When's the last time you checked him and you did a contractor check? People don't. But it's how do you give yourself more time to make sure that you are at least constantly trying to improve? It's just sort of little incremental changes, listening to the audience and making sure that, one size doesn't fit all. Definitely not.
Well, that's a really, really interesting way of framing it and thinking about it. And certainly, I often give people the advice to put their fees up. And actually that whole sort of preparatory piece that you do in the build up to it, I think is really, really, really smart. And I'm certain we'll get a fantastic traction. Final question then is that if you were to offer an SME estate agency owner, so someone who's got a business from anything from 1 to 20 branches, one piece of advice for the next 12 months, what would it be?
I would say that should be team focused, because you're only one mouthpiece. Yeah. There might be a few decision makers, but let's just say there's 1 to 5. But your team is going to be much bigger than that. And you need to make sure that they are coached and trained within an inch of their lives, so that the dialogue and the interactions they're having with your consumer base are on point, useful and meaningful.
So you need to define what it is you want them to do, communicate that, train, coach, develop, and then make sure that's happening. Is that how you see it?
And then measure and adjust. Make sure the gap is big enough to give them a chance to learn.
Brilliant. Okay, Spencer, thank you so much for taking the time.
Pleasure.
Thank you.